Hello, everyone, and big welcome to Emma Davies, who's one of our wonderful instructors and mentors at Click Love Grow. And today we're talking all about creativity. How are you going, Emma?
I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad.
Great to
So
see
I've been
you.
a
We're in
busy.
our complimentary pinks and purples today, very on brand.
Yes, I said to Pam yesterday, my hair's looking very click love grow at the moment. So perfect timing.
Well, Emma, you have hosted a series of workshops with us at Click Love Grow, a lot about editing. And for you, you've chatted about how editing is where you're able to sit down and really dive into the creative process. We did a workshop last year on color. And this year, we want to take people on a bit of a journey to explore and boost creativity in their everyday life. So I wanted to ask you, as a photographer, like, what does being creative mean to you? And has that evolved and changed over time from when you first started learning to photography to what you do with it now?
It definitely has evolved. I think in the beginning, when I first learned, like kind of pre Click Love Grow, when I was like in the dark room doing film, certainly there was a lot of creativity in those days because, film and darkroom it's a lot more tactile and a lot more hands-on. There was definitely a creative element, but I was so focused on learning the fundamentals, especially being that you can't, like with film, you didn't see the images till you printed them, so you had to
Of
get it right in
course.
camera.
Yes.
So I was so focused on learning the fundamentals of exposure and composition and all of that sort of thing that I didn't really think too much outside the box. And then as I kind of leaned into my technical skills got better, I
Mhm.
started to lean more into the creativity. And I think it was really when I did the advanced course and we learned about light, all of a sudden I started seeing light in a different way all around me, everywhere I went. And noticing it, I was actually sitting this morning. I went to Mother's Day breakfast at my son's school, and they have a little liturgy afterwards. And I was sitting in the church, and I was definitely paying attention, but I happened to find myself looking up, and there's these wooden beams at the top of the church, and I noticed the way the light was filtering through the sort of skylights at the top into these wooden beams, and it kind of reminded me of randomly a Girl Guide camp that I went on when I was a teenager. Those are the kind of things that go on in my brain when I think about creativity because it's all about connecting thoughts and feelings and memories. It's going beyond what you can see, in an image and sort of, yeah, infusing it with, all of the life experience and all of the sort of the journey that you've been on, bringing that into your work and weaving it as a thread
I love
through the
that.
stories in your images.
Very deep, Emma, which
Yeah,
I love.
maybe it
Um,
was my morning in church has given
it
this. It's
was.
given me cause to be
Oh,
reflective.
that's beautiful. And churches are a very good place to find beautiful and light,
Yes,
especially, beautiful old buildings with gorgeous windows and stained glass. But I love how you talk about this idea of creativity, something being more beyond the images. It's a way of thinking and it's something that you can bring into your life. Let's talk about that for a minute because I think, too, like as photographers, when we're first learning, we're very focused on the skills, like you said, those technical skills. We want to take a sharp photo, we want to be able to, capture nice light with our subjects. But then beyond that, when we have a little more intuition around getting the shots and working our cameras, we have more space to think about, okay, how can I create images that make us feel something or can push the boundaries? And creativity can be something that people can feel stuck with. And we'll talk about that and kind of how to get around that. But I want to talk about this place that once photography, is a skill that we have and something we like to practice. What do you think being creative and using photography as a tool for your own creativity actually adds to your life? Like, where does it sit and how do you feel about it?
I think for me, it gives me a freedom. It's something that I do for myself. It's a form of self-care almost, because I shoot, I guess I want to say like professional shooting journey has gone through many different sort of tangential changes over the years. Early on I was shooting sort of documentary style photos of my kids when they were little. Then I moved into, I've done a bit of event work, which is all very technical and, very sort of regimented. And lately, most of what I'm shooting is sports photography. Again, very technical, very important to make sure you get the settings right.
Mm.
Have an eye for composition because everything's happening so quickly. So all of that stuff is quite structured and quite, regimented. And so when I pick up my camera just for myself, that's when I like to try and look at things a bit differently. And I think if I just want to take a photo of something to remember it or because I've spotted it and it looks cool, I'll grab my phone and take a quick snapshot with my phone. But if I'm really trying to think about how a scene looks or how I can manipulate what I'm seeing, then I grab my camera because then I've got the skills in my hand um, to, yeah, you know, experiment. And a lot of
Mhm.
what we're talking about in the workshop, the first sort of half of the workshop is all about why it's important to have these creative processes and to give ourselves the space to identify ourselves as artists and to, give ourselves the freedom to break the rules that we've been taught when we were learning. And then the second part is all about the more practical side of things where, we've got some tutorials on actual, tangible creative techniques that you can use so that your images, have that sort of creative spark.
Yeah, I think it's nice to think about the mindset and the idea around creativity and what it can add to your life and how we can approach it. And then the more hands-on type techniques, not even necessarily techniques, but processes that we can use to untap that creativity. I feel like a lot of people say that, I don't feel like a creative person or I feel stuck. I don't have enough ideas. What do you think is something that you hope to share with people or you wish people kind of knew or believed about themselves for this potential of being creative?
So I think it's really important, and this is one of the things I do mention in the lessons. It's really important not to pigeonhole yourself. So for me, growing up, I was always really good at writing. English was, my best subject at school. I wanted to be a journalist, and I was a journalist before I, had babies and decided to teach photography. But so that was always my creative outlet was my writing. And I wrote a journal and I wrote for the school newspaper and I did all of those things that were writing. And I saw my creative strength as writing, and that was it. It fit in a box, and that was how I was creative. I
Yeah.
couldn't paint, I couldn't draw. I had friends who were really talented at those things, and I just thought, nope, this is me. Words are my thing. And then I picked up a camera when I was about 15. Well, I got my first camera when I was a bit younger, but at school when I was about 15. And I suddenly realized that I had another way to be creative that I could lean into. And it was kind of a journey. And I think it was a journey that probably took me, close to 20 years to really be able to confidently say, I'm a photographer and I'm an artist. Because I'm not just a writer, and I can still write, but it's okay to be a writer and a photographer. And in all of those things, it's okay to have the confidence to say, I am an artist in what I create. It doesn't have to be art that goes on the wall of a gallery or art that gets printed in a magazine or you don't need external validation to be able to say within myself, I am creative and I am an artist.
Yeah, I think for many of us that have come from, maybe being creative as a child, as a teenager, it's something that it feels a lot more natural. And then we come into adulthood and go into careers that potentially aren't creative, maybe go into, motherhood or child raising where we don't have a lot of brain space to do these things. I think one of the things that a lot of people, in our Click Club Grow community and can relate to is this idea of like finding something for ourselves and re-tapping back into this potential of thinking a little more creatively and having something that is for ourselves. And I think beyond the technical aspects of photography, there's such a joy in being able to play with the creative process. And like you said, it's not about the end product of, okay, I'm going to be creative and be featured on a gallery wall. That's the only path to being an artist, or that's the only way I can call myself an artist. It's more like a practice, right? A giving ourselves the time and the space to play with it and connect with others and have these conversations. All of that is creativity. And the more you do it, the more you can be open to it, right? So let's talk about the creative workshop that's coming up that you're hosting. It
Yes.
is focused on creativity and helping people have an opportunity to discover more about their own creativity. But tell us what people can expect in the workshop and why you're really excited about it.
So I've actually learned heaps while I was putting this workshop together because I've really been on my own deep dive. Obviously, like I said, I've been on my own creative journey. Well, I think, to be fair, we're all on our own creative journeys our
Mm,
entire lives. It's just that they kind of have peaks and troughs and ebbs and flows. And so there are times, like as kids, we're super creative. We don't have the kind of pressure of external sources
mm,
telling us that what we're creating isn't good. So I think we all are creatives our whole lives. But I think what I've come to is, you know, with this workshop is I've learned a lot about why creativity is so important and what kind of the theory is behind it. And in the first lesson, I look a little bit at the history of creativity and how, human beings as we are, creativity hasn't just been about art. It's been about exploration. It's been about, progress, technology, transport,
mm.
all of those things have all come out of creativity. If we weren't creative as human beings, even back in the caveman days when they're, with the rock painting and the ability to somebody's curiosity led them to discover fire, all of those things. So I've learned a lot about sort of that sort of stuff. And then also just getting to share with you guys some of my favorite creative techniques, because I often share images in our grads group or sort of elsewhere in the CLG community, and people will say to me, "Oh, how did you do that?" Or so being able to share some of those practical techniques and yeah, give you a look behind the madness that is my creative process.
Yeah, that sounds so interesting. It'll be such a nice exploration for people. What do you think are some daily or even weekly practices that you use to keep yourself out of a creative rut as a photographer? Are there little things that people can start thinking about even before the workshop?
Definitely. So one of the things that I talk about a bit in the workshop, but that's been I've had massive creative ruts over the years. I've had times I haven't picked my camera up for years. Like, I have all this expensive camera equipment and it sits in a box and it's gathering dust. Not because I don't have the skills to use it, but because I don't have the confidence or because I
Mm.
feel like, oh, I've shot all of that stuff before. It's all boring. I don't know where to go. So now I make a conscious point of making a date with myself once a week and picking up my camera. And like I said, I'm shooting a lot of sport at the moment. My girls play a ridiculous amount of sport, but picking up my camera just for me and shooting something. And sometimes it's as simple as going outside to the mailbox and, shooting the little dandelions that are growing on the sort of reserve across the road, or, you know, just mundane everyday stuff. You can find magic in that through the lens if you know how to look for it.
Okay, so sometimes I find that I really resist the creative process, and I don't know if that's because I'm afraid of what's on the other side or I'm very stuck in my habits. Why do you think people kind of hold back a little bit from really diving into exploring their creativity more?
Two things. I think the first one is probably priorities.
Yep.
And I know that that's one that I find myself is that, and it's not just because, I'm busy in my everyday life. It's the fact that if I pick up my camera and I shoot some creative things, then I have to edit them, then it's a whole big process. However, if you intentionally go out to shoot something, I do find that that sparks a lot more joy in the editing process than editing 300 photos from a football game. So that's the first one. And the second one, and I think this is probably the most important one, and it's something that we address like in depth in the workshop, is fear. I think people are afraid. People don't want to call themselves creatives because they don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want someone to say, well, you're not creative, that's rubbish. Or um, you're not creative because you don't have enough experience, or you haven't been published, or there's lots of, you don't count as an artist or as a creative unless you tick these boxes. And that's one of the things I'm trying to really break down in the workshop is you don't need any of that external validation. It doesn't matter what the next person's version of creativity looks like. It's about what it looks like to you. And it's not about the end result. And it doesn't matter if the images you take are rubbish. And I take you on a walk with me in the workshop where I'm going about my daily life, just taking random photos. And some of them are not great. You'll see them in the workshop. They're not great. I wouldn't necessarily be framing them to go on my wall, but you know, every photo you take, you learn something from, and you learn about light, and you learn about the gear that you're using, and you learn about composition. You learn what you like and what you don't like. So even though they're not necessarily photos that I might be like lining up to share on my Instagram, they're part of the process, and the
Mm.
process is where the learning and the magic is.
Definitely. We just have to be available to open ourselves up to that. And when you're talking about that fear, it's so funny because as a 40 plus woman, the rational part of my brain is like, I'm a grown up. It doesn't matter what other people think anymore. But there's that inner, you know, sense of fear and concern that overrides the rational thought that can be hard to break through, right?
And I think for those of us who do this as a job, like, shooting professionally or, as we do, teaching other photographers, there's also that fear that what if it's rubbish and people think you're not really you're not good enough to be a professional photographer, you're not good enough to teach photography. There's always that voice in the back of your head that
Who do you
says
think you are to do this?
100%. And so, letting go of all of that stuff. Don't worry about what the images you take look like. During the workshop, we're going to be putting together each lesson. You'll find a creative prompt to put together your own creative portfolio. And the whole premise of the creative portfolio is that these are images you're creating for you. And so you
Mm.
can choose to share them in the group. You can choose to share them however you like. But, the whole idea is just to create something that means something to you.
Yeah,
So,
I love
yeah.
that. Let's just talk for a minute about the container of doing something with a group in a set period of time because,
Mhm.
the internet is full of creative prompts that we could go and find at any moment, and yet we don't, right? And so, one of the things that people always say they really enjoy about the creative workshops at Click Love Grow is having this container with to come together with others and go through a series of prompts or like doing it as a project style, working towards this portfolio at the end. Why do you think that works so well?
So I've bought lots of workshops over the years, not like from varying places, and I have never finished a workshop that didn't have a thriving community, because some of the workshops you just get the content and then you work through at your own pace. Others, there's the odd sort of interaction or there might be a live call here and there, but it's having I guess, the accountability, but also, the connection with people in the group where they say, oh, hey, this is what I tried. It didn't work out this way, but it did work out that way. And you can think, oh, I can see how I could try that. And it
Mm.
just really encourages you to keep going. But also I find, someone might be a couple of lessons ahead of you and you might see what they're sharing. You're like, oh, now I'm excited to get to there. So I better keep going, kind of thing. I just find, yeah, for me, being someone who needs a lot of, I guess, connection and a lot of, community, I've never found another online photography community or community in general that's as supportive as the Click Love Grow community. And so I really love in our workshop groups the way that everybody sort of cheerleads each other. And I think this particular subject, creativity being such a personal one, is, I think it's going to be amazing to see how we lift each other up and build each other up as creatives
We're so,
over
oh, sorry.
just over the course of the workshop.
Definitely. And we have such a talented and diverse community of women in terms of where they live and the photography styles and genres and equipment they use. So I always find too that I just am so inspired to see the way that people take a prompt and interpret it very differently. But then that can prompt other ideas for people, and it has this great, effect of providing people with a source of ideas and inspiration as well.
So another photographer that who's kind of inspired me a lot in my own creativity, she talks about it as like pulling a thread, like you start pulling a creative thread. And I find that, when there's more than one person pulling on those threads, you tend to end up with, unexpected but exciting results. The more people there are pulling threads, the more creativity is it will flourish.
So fantastic. So I want to ask you just a couple of last questions. The first is, what do you think is something that people can do to start seeing the world with fresh creative eyes? Like, what's a small mindset shift that people can implement?
I mean, other than identifying themselves as a creative and saying, I am a
Mm.
creative, start looking around you. When you go out places, start noticing. And I see this with our advanced students. They're in going through the course at the moment. And especially when they're doing the second lesson on composition and color, they start to notice things in the world around them. You start to notice that, like I said in church this morning, the way the light was falling through the beams in the roof. You start to notice, shapes, and you start to notice shifts in the seasons. Start to look for those things, and it doesn't have to be, you know, hugely aesthetic. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Look for kind of this flashes of magic in your everyday life, and just allow yourself to notice those things. Write them down in a notebook, pop them in the notes in your phone, snap them with your phone camera. Just start noticing and observing things that you see in the world around you that make you feel curious.
I love that. And speaking of the world, there's a lot going on. The news
Oh,
is
yes, there is.
ever relenting. And, I don't necessarily know that it is more stressful than other times, but we certainly know about the stress of all the things that are going on. Why is something like a project like this, or diving into exploring your own creativity, even just picking up the camera, why is that such a great opportunity to turn off or switch off from everything else that's going on in life?
So I'm a massive doom scroller. So in fact, one of my goals for this year, I've set a lock on my phone so I can only use it a certain number of hours per day, because otherwise I just sit there and I mindlessly scroll. And like you were saying, there's some scary stuff happening in the world right now. I saw, this week it's India and Pakistan, there's Russia and Ukraine, there's, all of these things that are happening around the world that we can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do get sucked into this loop of, all of the stuff that's going on. And we've had the elections, and it's just, it's crazy. So I do find when I pick up my camera and I put my phone down, I'm stepping out of that, that crazy manic overthinking zone. And I'm stepping into the slow down, notice what's around me, be present in this moment right now. Don't worry about what might happen tomorrow. Don't even think too much about what happened yesterday. Just be present in this moment.
Yeah, and photography is just such a great tool to do that. When you pick it up, the fact that we do have to concentrate on elements like balancing the settings, paying attention to our composition, looking through that lens is such a nice, almost meditative process sometimes when we're exploring creative subjects, not necessarily while photographing our kids. That can be something different as well.
A little
But
stressful.
that can be a little more stressful, but the goal is different in that, right? Like when we're recording memories and moments and documenting that is achieving a different outcome and goal than playing with these creative topics. But just to wrap off, tell everyone a little bit more about what the workshop looks like and why they should jump in and take it with you.
Well, they should jump in and take it with me, because I really need some company over the next 4 weeks. That would be awesome. But aside from that, I just think, like you were saying, everything's crazy in the world right now, in the world as a whole, but also in our day-to-day lives, in how busy we are in our work, in our children, in all of the extracurricular commitments, in the volunteering that we do, and all of the other things that we bring into our lives. So, I'd love it if you would make this commitment to yourself that you're going to set aside just this little bit of time. And it's not, it's not a huge commitment, but just to set aside this little bit of time to think about, who am I? What do I want in, for my own creativity? And just, allow yourselves that time to, to be present and to, lean into your creativity. And I think hopefully if we can build on this together over the 4 weeks of the workshop, this is going to become a lifelong practice for you. This is something that will, stick with you, and something that you can keep using as a reset. When you feel yourself getting a bit too caught up in the day to day, pick up your camera, lean into some of the techniques that we've covered, remind yourself of some of the kind of mantras and thought processes in the lessons, and embrace the artist that lives inside you.
And what do you hope that people walk away feeling at the end of this workshop?
I want them to walk away feeling confident to call themselves artists, confident to identify themselves as creatives. I don't care if you shoot one photo during the workshop or if you shoot 1,000 photos during the workshop. I want you to develop the confidence to say, I am a creative, I am an artist, and validate yourself.
I love that. We all need that, wonderful opportunity to be able to dive in and explore our own creativity. And I know that people are really going to enjoy all of the pieces you've put together for this workshop, the exploration you're going to take people on, and of course, the community that we have doing it together. So if this sounds like something that's even remotely interesting, go and check out all the details for our upcoming workshop hosted by the wonderful Emma Davis. And we can't wait to see you inside.
I'll see you there.
Bye.
Thank you.